one.
Do you want me to speak to you or the camera?
Just speak to me.
Okay.
I don't think you've ever told me how you got into this business, Jan. How did you find your way in here?
Well, in a way, my standard answer is I was born to be in this business. When I was in my beneath age 10, I organized in my streets, my neighborhood, little productions that we do in someone's basements. So that's part of my theatrical bent too. I'm just born to be in theater. And so I would charge admission, maybe a penny or two to get, so I had to advertise it, you know, with homemade flyers that went around to the parents and stuck them in a mailbox. So, I mean, that's the simplest answer. After I finished high school, I went to college and majored in drama-theater with an emphasis on theater marketing. I knew by then, because I was very active in acting and theater from junior, even elementary and high school. So I decided that I might want to learn how to sell more tickets or to push theatrical enterprises so that people would want to come and pay some money to see them, or at least come and do something. I love to be an organizer, even if it's not a paid attraction. So that's how I basically eased up into it via education. I also took some writing courses at UVA. And I wound up, my first jobs were in radio here in Roanoke. I am, by the way, a Roanoke native. There aren't all of us here that are in this business. But anyway, I took a job at WROV radio after working at two other smaller stations for short periods of time. And at ROV, I was there for 5 years, and I really learned the business of writing copy and producing radio spots. I was not an on-air DJ. I did a lot of voice work, but primarily my title there was Director of Creative Services. And Bert Levine was a mentor to me for a lot of people that went to work through that station, and a lot of folks did. So I was there for 5 years, and then I decided, hey, maybe I ought to try TV. Someone is really pushing me to get out of radio and pulling me into a TV job. So I took the first TV offer and worked there for 6 months. And then along came a big giant station here in the same market. They took me to lunch and said, we want you to go to work at our station. So I resigned after 6 months with the initial station, and it was all very happy, and it was not a big problem for anyone. And then I went to work at Channel 10, SLS, for 2.5 years. And there I was also writing, directing live shows, filming on location for ads. In fact, when I was hired there, they told me that they wanted me to help them teach their sales staff how to sell television, because print media was getting 95% of everything, and radio was getting a little bit of it. But TV was new and experimental, even in the late 60s. It's when I was doing that. And so the salesmen that were there had been there since it was a radio company before it even became a TV show, a company rather. And so they, except for a couple of newer ones, were not able to really imagine how to sell television, which is difficult because you walk in and you say, you ought to buy television. The ratings suck. You're getting a lot more people in your newspaper ads, but give us a shot because we offer motion, emotion, movement, and people speaking. So I basically became the person, they called me the Director of Sales Development. And all I did was help the salesman by producing speculative advertising, actual on film sometimes if we thought it was going to be worth the investment. There was no videotape at that time that we could really shoot outside the station on. So it was all 16 millimeter color film, or sometimes black and white film, depending on the budget. So that I worked there then, and while I was working at ROV and at Channel 10, I was moonlighting with my own little side company called Jan Advertising. A friend of mine named Randy and he was a graphic artist and I was the other kind of person. And we pitched Lakeside Amusement Park and became their agency of record. Smartwear Irving Sachs, the clothing store then, that was our account. And I was also on the side part-time manager of the Traveltown Ice Arena out near Cloverdale, where the Traveltown Motor Lodge was. And that's where I began to be interested in ice skating. I'd always thought ice shows were amazing since I saw one at age 11. So then I helped produce Roanoke's first local live show ever, ice show at that arena, and lost a whole lot of money, relatively speaking, for my income at the time. But I learned a lot of lessons. And then, through a story that's way too complicated to explain, I got in touch with Madison Square Garden Productions. They actually got in touch with me, knowing what they'd heard about me, saying, do you think you could do some off-the-clock or part-time promotion for us? We have ice shows called Holiday on Ice, and they're going to be in Salem, Virginia, Norfolk, and Greensboro, and we don't have a representative who can handle that territory. Could you do it on the side and be okay with it? I said, yes, I can. So then I basically came up with promotional ideas to tie into the ice show performance and help scale the pricing and help place the advertising. All this while I was doing the Channel 10 and the ROV stuff. So basically, when Roy H. Park bought WSLS-TV, I was the first person of many to be fired on the same day. They cleaned house, and I have the honor of being the first one to go. So then I was unemployed, and 2 months after, I've just taken it easy. I thought I didn't need to panic for a moment. Madison Square Garden came a-calling on the telephone. We need you to come down to Knoxville, Tennessee, and help us do the publicity for our brand new tour that's in rehearsal here, that's going straight from here to New York City at the Garden. Okay, so I went down to Knoxville and spent 2 or 3 weeks doing a press kit and doing some voiceover work, which I did for them for years. That when the traveling show came to a city, the person who you heard speak was a recording of me. And so, therefore, while I was down there, the president of the Garden came down for the opening night of the performance there and approached me and said, Jan, we really would like to have you consider working for us full time if you think you can handle the pressures and the traveling. And I said, well, let me think about it, because I really wasn't sure I wanted to go on the road, which was an extensive job. You were out of town more than at home. But I already owned a house in Roanoke. I said, okay, if I can come home to Virginia with some reasonable amounts of time, breaks in between the out-of-town gigs, then I will do it. So I was set out to promote Holiday on Ice and ultimately Ice Follies, which was another ice show that the Garden bought. So we owned 2 of the 3 major ice shows. Then under the guise of the Garden, in addition to ice shows, Madison Square Garden to this day promotes and produces other entertainments that travel that aren't just in New York. And so under that guise, I promoted and set up the deals for bullfights in Puerto Rico, all kinds of wrestling in Mexico. And then I worked a lot out of the Los Angeles office. And I worked in almost 48 of the total 50 states. I even worked in Alaska. I was there for 10 years doing this work until I really got burned out in 1980. I said, enough already. This is really wearing me down. I want to be a homebody more. And I had been very lucky and earned a lot of money doing that work. So I didn't really need to go to work again. And I didn't. A partner and I bought a restaurant here and sold it because it was a flop. But I did the advertising for it. I'm sorry that didn't work. It was the food that killed it, I think. And so then I got a call from Bert Levine at ROV saying, can you help us at Christmas time write some of this copy of Christmas greetings? Because he knew I was around. And I said, okay, and I did. Then Claude Harrison contacted me. He was the owner of an ad agency called Claude Harrison Advertising. And he'd been at the business for a long time, and he needed a person like me who could write and also be an AE. So he called me in, and we interviewed, and I said, okay. So in July of 1981, I went to work full-time for Claude Harrison and did what I just said. I was a writer, and I was handed these big accounts to handle that I had no knowledge of, like Wendy's, Western Virginia Co-op, the Roanoke Gas Company, and Colonial American National Bank. Out of the gate, I'm calling on these people to handle their marketing and bring it back to the agency to deal with creative types and all the other people involved in that production. And in those days, there were no computers, so everything was hand-done, typed on real typewriters, and fonts were set and sliced with scissors, and it was a whole different world, kind of like it was in TV when I was doing things on 16-millimeter film. So I was just on the edge of the new era of high-tech advertising opportunities. But anyway, Claude Harrison was older, and he needed to retire, so he basically sold out to the Houck family. Houck Advertising was Virginia's first ad agency. Mr. Houck, CB, that founded it, came here from North Carolina basically to handle the Norfolk and Western Railway account, which was huge. That basically was all he did. And then over the years, they expanded to do other things, but the railroad was the big deal. So anyway, Houck took over Harrison, so I came with the deal. I was sort of bought, as it were. And I was glad to do that because I liked the Houck people. I'd known them for a while. And so I continued doing what I was doing at Harrison, handling those accounts and more. I was made a vice president soon after the merger, and so I was involved in administrative decisions. And so, guess what? That went out of business too in 1990. That's the same year I was named a silver medalist for my work in the AdFed, which I haven't talked about that, but I was involved in the AdFed very actively for 10 years. And most people who may be watching this may know what the silver medal was. I won't elaborate, but I was glad to receive it. And so I decided, after talking to some other ad people in the market who I thought maybe I could work for or with, it was bleak. I mean, there was no money to be made, and the challenges were not what I thought I needed to have. So I opened my own business. I incorporated in late 1990 as Jan Wilkins Enterprises. And what I wanted to do was entertainment marketing. I wanted to pick up on what I left off at Madison Square Garden. I cut deals with the Roanoke Civic Center, the Salem Civic Center. I produced and or promoted traveling shows that I had connections through New York. One of my great successes was bringing the Tour of Les Miserables to the Roanoke Civic Center. It was the first show that sold out 8 performances, clean, every seat was gone, at the highest prices that had ever been put into, the highest advertising prices for a ticket. No, the highest prices for a ticket to any show ever in the history of Roanoke for Les Mis. And it was such a great success. I brought it success. It was a great success. I brought it back again 2 years later, and it was a similar success, sold out. And the terms in selling out a show is going clean. That means you've sold every seat. And one of my mentors back at Madison Square Garden in the early days, I said, what is my goal? Putting asses in seats. That's your goal. And that phrase stuck with me a long time. I mean, that's some of the inside just kind of language that goes around in that business. So therefore, for the last 15, 16 years, I have basically worked for myself. I've employed other people over the years as business built or didn't. And therefore, in addition to the shows I brought to the Civic Center, the Roanoke Times invited me to take over the production and promotion of their event called Music for Americans, July 4th. I do that to this day. And I'm going to stop now, and you asked me something else.
Okay.